Hello and welcome to another playbook. This one is called The Art of Asking the Right Questions. And this playbook is very personal to me because it was inspired by something that happened very recently as a result of a conversation with my son. Now, for any of you who's a parent or for any of you who spent any amount of time, close to children, you know that kids love asking a lot of questions. And like any other adult or like any other parent, sometimes you reach the end of your patience and you snap back, or you preempt the question and you give the answer even before the kid has completed his or her question. Now, this is exactly what happened a few days back. My kid was asking me a series of questions, and after the umpteenth question, I just sort of I knew what his question was going to be, and I just said, wait, don't ask your question. This is the answer, and this is what you want to know. And he immediately said, but Papa, the answer is not important. The question is important. And I don't think he was trying to make a deep philosophical statement, but I think what he was trying to say was that his ability to articulate a question and to express his inquisitiveness and to express his curiosity was important at that point. And this is an important, learning moment for me as a parent, that I had to encourage him a little bit more and make sure that he keeps asking the questions that he always asks. But the fact is that what was the most important aspect of asking the question is not the fact that I was giving answers, but the fact is that by asking a series of questions, he was honing his skills at asking the right type of questions and trying to reframe the questions that he was framing and get it to a place of articulation where the question made complete sense. Now, this is something that he somehow has fundamentally grasped, but I realized that this ability, the ability to ask the right questions, is something that is amiss. And especially now when I apply this to the world of product building and product development, I realize that whether it's product managers or it's designers or it's engineers, that a lot of times we don't ask questions. Forget about asking the right questions, but we actually don't even ask questions. And we have formed a world around us where we value answers a lot, but we don't necessarily value spending time in the problem space and really diving deeper into the problem space. So from that perspective, this is a companion video to a video I've shot earlier about, problem solving and how to spend more time in the problem space. So do watch that video. But I think in this particular video, I do want to dive deeper into the art of asking the right questions. So let's jump in. Now, for anyone who's a fan of fantasy fiction and has read Douglas Adams' amazing The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, it's a trilogy in 5 parts because he started out by writing a trilogy and then suddenly realized he wanted to write a 4th book and then a 5th book. So by the time he finished the series, there were 5 books in the trilogy. So he just called it a trilogy in 5 parts. But if you've read the book, you'd realize that there's this supercomputer which eventually comes up with the ultimate answer, the answer to the ultimate question of the life, the universe, and everything, and the answer happens to be 42. And if you read the book, you realize that 42 as an answer is a completely nonsensical concept. But what's important is that ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And I think asking the right question, essentially what Douglas Adams was perhaps trying to tell all of us, that humanity needs to do a better job of asking the right questions, and that answers would be immaterial and answers would actually be fairly obvious if you ask the right questions, if you ask the right big questions, right? So philosophically speaking, I think this again sort of goes towards the point that, asking the right questions matters. Now let's come to something closer to our world. There's this apocryphal story, and there is no attribution. In reality, I don't think Henry Ford ever actually went around asking people this question. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? So Henry Ford, before he started the Ford Motor Company, did he go around asking people what they wanted? And the answer is no. Maybe he did not do his user research or market research as we think he did. But I love the fact that this quote is attributed to him. And I always say that, never let facts come in the way of a good story. What it leads to is a really good story. Now let's think deeper. In the time and in the age when Henry Ford decided to form the Ford Motor Company, what were the things that he could have done? If he had gone and asked people at that point what they wanted, they would have said, hey, we could do with faster horses. Some of them would have said that, horses are not very comfortable when, we usually travel by horse carts. And we wish horse carts were faster, or horse carts were more comfortable, or horse carts could get us from point A to point B faster. Now, the thing is, this could lead to multiple roads, right? And literally, it could lead to a road. Now, Ford could have said, what we need are actually much better roads, because our current roads don't do a good job of carrying horses and horse carts. If we had better roads, people could move around much faster. So he could have formed a road building company. Or he could have said, let me start a horse breeding farm and get the best horses from around the world and sort of like build horses which are much better at carrying people and can still go very fast and are comfortable, right? Or he could have formed a company to build better horse carriages, or he could have formed a company to build horseshoes, right? But he didn't do any of these things, right? He essentially boiled the problem down to the statement that, hey, people want to get from point A to point B in a much faster way, right? And that is the need of the hour, that people need to move around much faster, and horses are an outdated mode of transportation. So let me build something much better, and which is why he built motor cars, right? So that again sort of leads us to the fact that asking the right question sometimes is a lot more important than the answers, because the answers eventually come if you ask the right question. The right question in this place was, how can we as a society, as people, get from point A to point B in a much faster, much safer, and much more secure way, right? And which is why cars. So let's look at some product questions, right? And see if these are the right kind of questions we should be asking. So suppose you run an app, right? And you built an app, and you're looking at install retention, right? So install retention essentially is, if 100 people installed the app and opened the app yesterday, how many of them came back one day after installing? So D1 retention is, say, and suppose your app's D1 retention is 30, which means if 100 people installed the app yesterday, then 30 of them came today and opened the app. And you could say, out of 100 people, only 30 people came. So why is D1 install retention poor? Now, is this the right question to ask? How would we reframe this question? Second, if we were a SaaS company and we had very high churn in our product, essentially people were quitting the product and not renewing their subscriptions, we could ask this question: why do we have high churn, right? But again, is this the right question to ask, and how do we get it to the place where it becomes the right question? So let's dig deeper and let's look at a number of different ways in which we could get to the sense of the right question, right? So the first method is the 5 whys method, which was popularized by Toyota. It's a method that is used to sort of do root cause analysis. It essentially is a very simple, repetitive process. Keep asking the question why. And every time an answer comes, you take that answer and you again sort of reapply it. So essentially, primary goal of the technique is to determine the root cause of a defect or a problem by repeating the question why. Each answer forms the basis of the next question, right? So let's go back to our question. Why is D1 install retention poor? The answer could be that, hey, people are not coming back to the product after day one. So why do so few people come back, right? So fewer people are coming back on D1. So immediately you'll ask the next why. Why do so few people come back? And the answer could have been, they didn't want to use the product again. And then you would ask the question, why didn't they want to use the product again? Or why don't they want to use the product again? And you would have said, well, they didn't find value in the product on the very first day when they used the product. And you'd immediately ask, why did they not find any value in the product on the very first day they used the product? And, right here, you don't even have to go to the fifth question. But the fourth why itself is a very revealing why. You have poor D1 install retention because your users found very little value in your product on the very first day they opened up your product and used your product, right? The answer to how do I have better D1 install retention is not in sending out more notifications and telling people to come back and use your product. It's in the fact that create a product which provides the user such high value on day one that they make it a point to use it the next day, right? Is it essential to them? Is it solving a core problem to them? So what kind of value are people looking for could potentially be the fifth question, right? If they didn't find value in this, then what is it that they would find value in and come back the next day, right? So, the classic thing in this case, does it pass the toothbrush test, right? Which is, you have to brush your teeth every day. So you need the toothbrush every day and you need to use it at least once a day, but hopefully twice a day, right? So do they find value in this? And this is a classic way in which sort of you can use the 5 whys method to drill down to a more revealing question. So essentially peel away the layers and sort of get to the more important question. Another method is called upstream thinking. So upstream thinking is essentially, don't look downstream, but look upstream. So B2B SaaS subscription-based product and churn is an issue, right? Downstream thinking would be, how do you resolve? We can send out timely notifications and reminders, which tells people that, hey, the product is up for renewal. We could offer them a grace period, or we could offer discounts and offers so that, we could make sure that they renew. But this is what you do downstream of the fact that churn is high. What do you do upstream? Which is if you swim upstream and try and figure out why is the churn high. And then you'd say, what is causing this churn? And you'd say poor product usage. People actually don't use this product. So, they at some point they started using this product. They subscribe to this product, but they don't regularly use it. So when it came back for renewal, they're like, good riddance. I don't want to renew this. I'm not going to add my credit card again. I'm not going to pay the fees again. So the fact that it's not relevant for the user. So if you want to solve churn, you have to solve for this. I'm not saying don't solve for the downstream problems. Sure, have a great notification and reminder system, have a grace period system, have discounts and offers, but have you solved the upstream problem first, which is your product usage high? And is your product actually relevant for your users? A third way of thinking is inversion. And I've spoken about this in the past. It's a mental model that I personally use a lot. Right? And what inversion does is it considers the opposite of what you want. So most people think forward, but very few people think backwards, and one needs to do both, right? So the steps in inversion are: define the problem. What do we want to happen? Invert the problem. What is it that we do not want to happen? And then 3, avoid all of the above at all costs, right? So an example of this would be, what is the best possible job for me in the world which will bring me great joy? Suppose this is the problem you are trying to solve. You inverse it. What is the worst possible job for me in the world which will make me miserable? And now, 3rd, you avoid this at all costs. So inversion is another way in which you take a question, but you invert it, right? And you look at the opposite of that question, and that leads to a much better answer. So inversion is a very good way of reframing the question and asking a very different question, right? So we've looked at 3 techniques, right? We looked at the 5 whys method, right? We looked at inversion. We essentially looked at upstream thinking, right? But this should start giving you the sort of a framework for thinking about questions and how to ask better questions, right? First, poor questions lead to poor answers. Second, you have to dig deeper. When you dig deeper, you keep peeling the layers away. So you go to a more fundamental question which is hidden under the layers. And 4th, you reframe the question. Right? By reframing the question, you ask a better question. And again, you try and think about the answer and you think, is this a good answer? And if it's a poor answer, that means your question is poor, and you repeat the whole process. You repeat the whole process till you get to the place where the question is so obvious that it gives, the question is so fundamental that it gives the most obvious, beautiful answer. And that is what leads to great results, and sort of this is what it genuinely means to spend more time in the problem space, right? So I hope this video made sense to all of you. Essentially what we did today was we spoke about why asking the right questions matters so much, and I think it's a skill that all product builders need to develop. So look through this again, look at the techniques that we've described, try and build your own framework based on all these other principles and all these other mental models, and see if you can develop the ability to ask better questions. And if you have more questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. And if you're enjoying these playbooks, do subscribe to the channel. Take care. Bye. See you in the next playbook.